Karthikeyan, President of the Foundation for Peace, Harmony and Good Governance, for giving me this opportunity of having a sharing with you, a dialogue with you on Gandhi this evening. I didn't mean to begin with an anecdote, but Professor Bijlani, I cannot help beginning with this anecdote because it's very similar to yours. Though it was not part of what I was going to say. And the same experience I would like to share with you I had in Germany. I was in Bonn for an international conference, and I was walking to the venue of the conference from my hotel, and this German young girl, 19 years old, I asked her the way, and then we started talking, and she got to know I'm going to speak on Gandhi. And she actually started crying. She said, why did they kill him? Such a good man, and crying. And I was so taken aback. I thought, this young 19-year-old German girl, what is she in Bonn in Germany? This was about 12 years ago. So when you said that anecdote about that American, here is this young girl, 19 years old and crying. And I was just stunned, So anyway, this was just not part of what I was going to say. Today is the eve of Gandhi's 86th anniversary of the Dandi March, the Salt March, the 86th anniversary. 6th of April is the anniversary of Gandhi's Dandi March. So I thought it's in the fitness of things that I should explain both Gandhi's concept and practice of Satyagraha. And also more so because Professor Bijlani has already very eminently pointed out the values Gandhi stood for. So let me take you to a different plane. I shall be focusing on 4 main points. First of all, how was the word Satyagraha coined, the genesis of the word. Secondly, the essential meaning and aim of Satyagraha, any Gandhian Satyagraha. Number 3, I shall analyze the Salt March as a form of Gandhian Satyagraha. And finally, I shall bring out the relevance of Satyagraha to our times by sharing with you a global Satyagraha and seeking your feedback on that. With regard to the first point, the origin of the word Satyagraha, where does it come from? When Gandhi started out Satyagraha, I suppose you all know, it was in the year 1906, 110 years ago, in South Africa, where he was fighting racism. And there the Quakers, obviously Gandhi wanted to use non-violent resistance. And the Quakers, the peace group, they used the word passive resistance for non-violent resistance. And Gandhi did not like the word passivity in passive resistance. He felt that non-violent resistance is something very active. There's nothing passive about it. So he actually offered a prize in his newsletter, which was called Indian Opinion in South Africa. As you know, Gandhi was editing a newsletter all his life. It was a dialogue he kept with himself, an introspection every week. So there he offered a prize of $50 for someone to come up with an equivalent for non-violent resistance without the word passive in it. And Magan Lal Gandhi, his nephew, came up with the word Sad Agraha. Sad means good, good. And Gandhi substituted Sad with Satya. So Satya Graha. So that is the genesis, that is where it has come from. And of course, as we all know, that Satyagraha is now, in fact, today part of the English language. It's accepted in the English dictionary too as a form of non-violent resistance. My second point about the meaning of Satyagraha, it's a compound Sanskrit word, Satya and Graha. Satya means truth, and truth comes from the root Sat. Sat means that which is, that which exists. In other words, you cannot destroy truth. So truth is, you cannot destroy it. And Graha means holding fast onto truth. Yeah, Agraha is to hold fast onto the truth, even at the cost of life itself. So that is the way Gandhi practiced it. That is his meaning. And of course, the aim of Gandhian Satyagraha, any Satyagraha you take, then Champaran, Salt, whichever, there's only one aim, and that is to make the injustice visible. Whatever injustice is going on in the society, to make it visible. That is the conscious aim of any Gandhian Satyagraha. I'll now come to my third point of the analysis of the Salt March, just an example of the Satyagraha. And why I'm doing this is to show you Gandhi's skill as a politician, his brilliance as a strategist of direct action, and his excellent tactics as the general of a non-violent army of the common masses. His strategy here gives you many valuable insights into conducting non-violent resistance to bring about social and political reality transformation. Just a few words about because I would like to show a video on the clip from the Salt March from Rishon Attenborough's film. And why I'm doing that is because it's just so important, the Salt March. In 26 days, Gandhi created a nation out of 500 million people. Before the Salt March, the position of the British and the Indians was like this. You know, the British were here, the Indians were here, and the Indians could never think of protesting or defying the British. And also, you know, the Gora Sahab, the white, we're still stuck on white, you know, somebody who's white is superior. We're still stuck on that. But they couldn't think of defying the British. And after the Salt March, after the Dandi March, the position became like this, you know, equal. For the first time, every Indian felt equal to the British who were ruling the country or in the country. And even politically, Gandhi was invited for the first time to the Round Table Conference in London, as you all know. And for the first time, the Indians and the British sat together and negotiated terms of settlement. So India was recognized for the first time as an equal. Also, there's another thing. 500 million people into a nation in 26 days. Without the aid of social media, there's no such thing as Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all those things. There were not even phones. And well, even the print media, where were the newspapers or anything? So just by choosing the right strategy, you know, how much he did in 26 days. Of course, I'll explain that later. And the video clip is also, please, when you see it, please notice towards the end, there is this boy who climbs upon the tree and views that whole, the people walking along after Gandhi. And you know, see the emotion on his face. That's symbolic of what India happened to the Indians. There was suddenly the self-confidence, the pride in India, the fact that I'm Indian, I'm proud to be Indian, and all those things, they're all in that emotion. So we'll just take the clip from Attenborough's film, and then I shall analyze the Salt March. As it looks, there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. And why I'm doing this is to tell you that, when you apply non-violence, it's nothing very easy. You have to use all your gray matter, your intelligence and everything to be able to achieve what you want through non-violence. So the first thing is that Gandhi picks the issue of Satyagraha, in this case the Salt March, with great care. He picks, the salt law by making salt. Why? Because the Salt Act imposed by the British, the British had the monopoly to make salt. No Indian could manufacture it without taking a license, and there was a heavy tax on it. Now, India, as you know, is a hot country, and salt is a very basic need. Not so much in Europe, but in India, nothing can survive without water and salt, especially when it's very, very hot. So that's one thing. Secondly, with regard to the international image of a democratic people and a just people that the British have. So it was very difficult for them not to allow the Indians to make a pinch of salt for consumption. So he picks this issue with great care. And there's also another thing. Why salt? Why not something else? Here again, the salt has something very significant for the Indian psyche. Let me just tell you. We say namak haram or tera namak khaya hai ya namak chhidakna. You don't say chini haram or chini chadakna, namak. It's very, very important. Then also, India is a very borrowing country, Like even in I live in a flat and my downstairs neighbor is a very good friend. It can happen sometimes that you run out of tomatoes, so she'll send you 2 tomatoes, or she runs out of, wants to make nimbu pani, nimbu nahi hai ghar mein, she asks me. You can borrow anything from your neighbor, but you never borrow salt. Never. There's a dignity about buying your own salt. You never borrow salt. Then there are also 2 superstitions connected with salt. One of them is, some of you may be familiar with this, that if you drop salt while you're cooking in the kitchen, the superstition is that you must pick it up and put it in the water. If you don't do it, then when you die, you will have to pick up those grains of salt with your eyelashes. So that is a superstition. And well, to feel safe, I think it's good to put it. And actually, it's very good for the environment if you put it, if you let it go in the water. So that's one. Another thing is, let's say somebody comes to my house and there's not enough salt in the food and they want salt. Now you can put anything in your friend's hand, fruit or sugar or whatever, but you never put salt. And why? Because they say the superstition is that the friendship breaks. So again, it's a superstition, but nevertheless, it's about salt. Then also, like a woman or a man can be beautiful, attractive, etc., can also have sex appeal. Now, the word for sex appeal in Hindi is namkeen, not meetha, but namkeen. So just to tell you that for the Indian psyche also, salt is very important. Like you break bread together in the West. Here you eat salt. So, tera namak khaya hai, that type of thing. Also, apart from this, he picks, in Satyagraha, you pick one specific issue at a time. This is very, very important. So, of course, the ultimate aim was independence from the British. But the immediate aim was to break the salt law. And only one issue at a time for Satyagraha. Only one. You can't confuse this. And as Professor Bijlani rightly pointed out, and also Dr. Karthike, Martin Luther King Jr., if you read his book, Roads to Freedom, the Montgomery Struggle, his fight against racism, he learned this from Gandhi. He says there that we made one of the principal mistakes we made in Albany was that we focused on too many issues. We had to focus on one issue. So you have to focus on one issue and take it forward. On that depends the success of Satyagraha. Well, the second is choosing the place of Satyagraha. Now Gandhi, of course, lived at the sea coast. He could have made salt there. But this is excellent strategy. He chose the Dandi beach, which was 241 miles away from where he lived, on the Gulf of Camp Bay, and it took 26 days to reach it. Now, why Dandi? Because this gave him, the 26 days gave him ample time to draw public interest. Everybody in 26 days came into a nation, attract international media. He mobilized all the Indian people. And the British were really helpless to prevent this mass mobilization with steadily increasing participation. And another part of this excellent strategy is walking to the sea is not illegal. Making salt is. So until he makes the salt, he cannot be arrested. So excellent strategy, he gets what he wants. The strategy of the man. So just think, why he chose the Dandi beach. Next is choosing the date of Satyagraha. As you know, April the 6th is when he started. Now why? Just by choosing the right date without any Facebook, Twitter, etc., he mobilized the Indian people. Why? Because that was the day, 1 week was going to be celebrated as the anniversary of the Jallianwala Bagh, the 1919 tragedy, General Gwyer, firing on the crowd. So the anniversary was beginning that day, on April the 6th, and finished on April the 13th is when he reaches there. So just by choosing the right date, he is able to mobilize the Indian sentiment. Picking the time, this is Nehru in his autobiography has testifies to Gandhi, where he says that he has the knack of choosing the correct psychological moment and knows his India well. Also, it's the date. It's also when you choose the action. The next will be choosing the action of Satyagraha. Here again, the action has to be one which it admits of universal participation. Because Gandhi's concept of power is popular, not elitist. Popular means people's power. Each one of us has the power to work for social and political reality transformation. Each one of us. So each one should be able to participate in the Satyagraha. So making salt, you don't need a PhD in physics to be able to make salt. Everybody can participate. So universal participation, that's very, very important. And secondly, it has to be positive and constructive. For instance, you cannot burn a school down or loot a train, or what happened in Haryana recently. You can't do that. You have to do something. You can't do anything violent. It has to be positive. It has to be constructive. The action of Satyagraha. That's very, very important. And Arne Naess, who's written, unfortunately, all the good analytical writers on Gandhi's philosophy are from the West. Arne Naess is one of the first writers. He writes in Gandhi and Group Conflict, a very good book, where he talks about how this constructive nature and choosing salt, it drove the British into a corner, and they could not, they became tyrants in the eyes of the world public, because what were the Indians doing? Merely seeking the right to make salt. Next is the means of Satyagraha. There are two means. Truthful, you have to use truth and non-violence are the two pillars of Gandhi, right? So truthful means is very, very important. Gandhi, of course, truth is God. And here I cannot help sharing a quotation from Gandhi with you. I quote, he says, "In the beginning I used to say, God is truth. But after 40 years of ceaseless endeavor to find the truth in my own life, I today say to you, truth is God." So from God is truth to truth is God. This is a whole thing in itself. But anyway, so since truth is paramount, truth is important everywhere. And so truth means no secrecy. In non-violent resistance, unlike violent resistance or military resistance, there's no secrecy. All your cards are on the table. For instance, let's take in this case, you always tell, first of all, there's no enemy in non-violent resistance. There's only an opponent or a wrongdoer, somebody who's done a wrongdoer, and there's always a distinction made between the wrongdoer and the wrongdoing. You protest against wrongdoing, but in love with the wrongdoer, because obviously, you cannot identify the wrongdoing and the wrongdoer. That is the key difference between violent and non-violent resistance. So coming back to the Salt March, how does Gandhi start? You always tell the person who is doing wrong, look, you're wrong, and I'm going to protest against your wrongdoing, and this is how I'm going to protest. That's exactly what Gandhi does. There's a very famous letter of March the 2nd, 1930, which he writes to the then Viceroy, Lord Irwin. He writes to him that, Your Excellency, is wrong for you to be in our country. Please leave, because it's our right to be independent, and you please leave by March the 10th. I give you so many days to leave, and if you don't leave, then we'll have to do a protest against this injustice. Well, obviously, the British do not leave by March the 10th. So again, on March the 11th, he publishes again a letter in, that time it was Young India. And there he says that, well, you have not left. Today is the last day. So then the next day, on March the 11th, again he publishes in his newsletter all the names and the ages and the identification of all the leaders who are going to lead the march. And he gives 3 lists. He says, these are the people who are going to lead. We are going to make salt. To defy this, the salt law is very unjust. You should not have a monopoly. We should have the right to make it. And these are the people who are going to lead the march. If you arrest them, here is a second list. If you arrest them, here's a third list. And if you arrest them, then as you saw in the video also, that then you have to arrest the whole of India. But we will make salt. So all your cards are on the table. Again here, I cannot but quote from Gandhi's autobiography, Nehru's autobiography, where he testifies to the psychologically liberating effects of this struggle without secrecy on the Indian psyche and its demoralizing effect on the British. I quote, says Nehru, above all, we had a sense of freedom and a pride in that freedom The old feeling of oppression and frustration was completely gone. There was no more whispering, no roundabout legal phraseology to avoid getting into trouble with the authorities. We said what we felt, and we shouted it out from the housetops. What did we care for the consequences? Prison? We looked forward to that. It was King Edward's Hotel that we went to. The innumerable spies and secret service men who used to surround us and follow us about became rather pitiable individuals, as there was nothing secret for them to discover. All our cards were always on the table. So this is truth. And let me here share a quote from Gandhi where he says, Gandhi is fully convinced, I quote, no underhand or underground movement can ever become a mass movement or stir millions to mass action. Please notice, Gandhi is very truthful in his use of words. In fact, about him, it is said that, like Plato, the words have grown in their places. And his economy of words, the right word for the right thought, etc. Look at the word, or stir millions, not compel. Stir means from within, impel. You're impelled to join a satyagraha. All his satyagrahas, whether it was South Africa or whether it was India, they all had a snowballing effect. Started with a handful and went on and on and on. So impelled, people were not compelled. They were impelled to join. The beauty of Gandhi, and that is truth. I mean, truth force, soul force, these are not empty words. As Professor Bijlani also pointed out, it's something to be experienced, something to be experimented with. And you have Gandhi's, autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. And it was really an experiment with truth. Well, the next is non-violent means only. Here again, obviously, Gandhi has to use non-violence only. But apart from the philosophy, it's excellent strategy. How? Number 3 things. Look at the excellent public image it got him. He became the conscience of the world. The British were so scared that we must not kill Gandhi because they knew he will get killed, but he will not kill. And you even saw in the Darshana salt works in the film also, where they protested, how they were hammered, but nobody used violence. No, and so it is really the beauty of the man. Today we may abuse him or whatever, but he not only created a nation, he created a fearless nation, at least maybe for a short while. A fearless nation, people ready to give up their lives, but not use violence. I mean, look at the Chauri Chaura incident. Gandhi calls off the whole non-cooperation movement because why? As you all know, the Indians, they set fire to a police station in Chauri Chaura, manned by the British. And of course, 6 policemen were killed. And the Congress party, Nehru, everybody was so angry with Gandhi. Bapu, only 6 people were killed, only 6 politicians, policemen. And he wrote an editorial the next day, and he said, what do you mean by only 6? You go and ask those, the wives and the children of those policemen, for them the universe is gone. How can you say only 6? And he called off the whole movement. I mean, it requires excellent public image that he gets, the media attention, etc. Excellent strategy as well, not just a philosophy. Secondly, it helps to unite the movement. There's a particular bonding. When you come together and you work for something which has of value, there's some bonding takes place. So the spirit is very, very good. So it helped to unify India in a very peculiar bond. And that is why, like Dr. Karthikeya Singh, in his Kalaji, I think, your wife, I mean, that they gave them jewelry. He would go and people would just give. I mean, just look at the unity in India at that time. It's remarkable. And thirdly, the discipline. When you only use non-violence, there's a lot of discipline. How difficult it is not to get angry. How difficult. I mean, when you even consciously try, I think we all try. But how difficult, you sort of just lose your temper, you lose your cool, later on you regret. But to practice non-violence, he's a man who practiced non-violence, not just the concept. So it's a very big thing, using non-violent means. The last is the focus. Whatever you do, it brings the whole thing to a focus in attaining the long-term goal. Of course, the independence happened much later, but it was a turning point. There was no looking back. India had to get independence. And here I cannot help but quote from Gene Sharp, who has written tremendous books on Gandhi. Please read Gandhi as a Political Strategist. There's so many books on that. All the Western thinkers have done remarkable research on Gandhi. So I just read from that. The Salt March and Gandhi's arrest was the signal for mass non-violent revolt throughout the country. So here people are impelled to do. He didn't tell people. As the movement progressed, there were mass meetings, huge parades, seditious speeches, a boycott of foreign cloth, picketing of liquor shops and opium dens. Students left British government schools. The national flag was hoisted. There were social boycotts of British government employees, short strikes, resignations by government employees and members of the Legislative Assembly and Council. British government departments were boycotted. All this is spontaneous. Huh? Gandhi didn't say do this, do this, do this. It's just spontaneous. Foreign insurance firms, the postal service, British postal, they were all boycotted. Many refused to pay taxes. Some renounced titles. Even my grandfather gave up his title. He was a Rai Bahadur, he gave up his title. There were non-violent raids and seizures of government-held salt and so on. All this was a prelude to the attainment of Swaraj or independence. And here again, I cannot help but quote Gandhi, where he says, only the general, look at his words, the general, look at the amount of the planning that goes into non-violent resistance. It's remarkable. It's not so easy. Only the general who conducts a campaign can know the objective of each particular move. And again, Gene Sharp says, the Salt March is a classic example of a nationwide non-violent struggle. Maybe we have to have an international non-violent struggle, which I'm going to share with you in a few minutes, and let's see where it can go. Independence could not long be denied, and the British government, of course, recognized India as an equal, and this was very, very upsetting to Churchill and very reassuring to Gandhi. And so this is just in a nutshell. I've tried to do a very quick analysis of the Salt March, and now I come to the last part of my of what I want to say this evening and share with you a global satyagraha based on similar lines, and this is on legalizing non-violent conflict resolution. As you all know, I think all of us in this room, if I asked you, would you prefer non-violence or violence? You would all, I'm using the word prefer. I'm sure you would all, is it so? Would you all prefer non-violent society? Would you prefer non-violence? I think all of us would. Put your hands up. Okay. Yeah, all right. So if we would prefer that and you want a non-violent world order, we want a non-violent society, we got to work for it. And again, here Gandhi, I quote, he says, you must, politics is like the coil of a snake in a democracy. Whatever you want to do has to touch politics. So I think what we have to do is legalize or politically legalize, we should work for the political legitimization of non-violent conflict resolution. A few words. What we have done, all the adults living in democracies, that's you, me, Dr. Karthike, all of us, we have all legalized or politically legitimized violence as a means of conflict resolution, and we spend $2 million plus, almost 3 million actually, 2.85, $3 million every minute on this. That is the global military expenditure. And at the same time, and that's every minute, we don't even spend $1 a minute teaching how to use non-violence to resolve conflict. And according to Gandhi, if you study Gandhi, he always talks about non-violence as a science, the science of non-violence, the science of satyagraha. So what happens? Science means any, let's take, any science, apply the definition of any science, physics, chemistry, whatever, and see what we get on non-violence. Any science has a definite, it's a body of knowledge, so is this. And in fact, Gandhi is very prophetic. Today you have non-violent, you have departments of peace studies in Europe and in America, unfortunately not in India. In India, no course on Gandhi is taught. Only at the postdoctoral level you have research, but you have to go abroad to attend a course on Gandhi. So that's like non-violent studies or peace studies. It's a whole systematic body of knowledge. Number two, it has to be learned. And number three, only when you learn it can you apply it. So if non-violence is science, it has to be studied, acknowledged as a science, learned, and then applied. So coming back to, and not only that, At the same time, just for your information, 16,000 children die every day. UNICEF figure, you can check it out, every day. Well, naturally, in our global village, well, obviously in the so-called third world, they won't die in Europe and America because of malnutrition or elementary health, lack of health care or whatever. Then the ecological imbalance is due to the war system. Because it's mainly because of the nuclear weapon testing and the waste from military industry. And then also nuclear war by mistake can happen any minute. Then apart from the financial resources we spend on teaching how to go to war, the human resources, the best minds of our century have been engaged in what? Military R&D, how much money goes into that? How to make a better weapon? How sad. So taking all this together, what we need is to politically legitimize non-violent conflict resolution. How can that be done? Well, this is a campaign that and of course, ultimately the aim is to go a world beyond war. It's a very focused, one-track agenda. We don't want nation states to go to war. Nation states should not go to war. And so the way out is to focus on legitimizing non-violent conflict resolution. How? Well, there's a demand made to every government around the world that, like you have to introduce non-violent defense or non-violent conflict resolution in the system. That means you have a defense ministry in every country. You keep that. It's actually a military defense. Let's keep that. But every country also starts a non-violence ministry, not a peace ministry, because peace is a very loaded word. You can say you need nuclear weapons to keep the peace. Your approach to peace. If you say nuclear weapons to keep the peace, it's a different world you build. If you say need to kill is wrong, and then you build a different world. So, and to kill is wrong. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, ahimsa parmo dharma, all these fancy words, vasudeva kutum, are we not schizophrenic? That when it comes to, classroom, lectures, etc., we are all doing that. And ultimately, nationalism and go to war, etc., etc. So anyway, every country would start a non-violence ministry. And just like you have military defense, you have non-violent defense. That means at the grassroots level, every country has national defense training colleges, IMA, NDA, West Point in the States, every country. In the same way, every country would start a non-violence defense academy. And there's a blueprint of what will be taught there. And by the way, I'm only a Gandhi expert, but there are non-violent defense experts who have worked with these questions for the past quarter of a century. And I have met, most of them are my friends. There's Gene Sharp at Harvard. I've lectured there, had lunch with him, and he's an ardent advocate of non-violent defense. There's Robert Burrows in Australia. There are so many people. There's a blueprint of what will be taught there. If you want, I can tell you later. And all we need is the political will to put it into practice. The second demand from every country, every government around the world is the legal democratic option to be trained in non-violent defense rather than the military system. Again, a lot of young people, even in India, go and join the army for their bread and butter. They don't want to learn how to kill. So fine, let it be an open thing. You want to defend your country, you want to how to learn to kill, please go and learn. Because you learn how to use a gun. You're not born knowing how to use a gun. You learn how to go to war. In the same way, you learn how not to go to war. That also has to be learned. So let them go and train there. And the last is the legal democratic option for taxpayers to divert their defense tax from military defense to non-violent defense. Again here, of course we want a defense. Of course you want to pay your defense tax. You just you don't believe in violence. You don't want to kill. Why kill? And especially, how foolish it is. Let's say there's a war today between America and India, chalo, Pakistan and India. Do you think Narendra Modi is going to get killed? Of course not. Who is going to get killed? My brother, my husband, my brother, father, my son. How sad. We are used as cannon fodder, and then sometimes, the line of control is again back to square one. All that, why? Why be used for that? So this is, in a nutshell, the political legitimization of non-violent conflict resolution and how to work for it. There's a whole strategy, how to use social media at our disposal, and then also to use symbols. You see, Gandhi says that all you have in non-violent struggle is people and symbols. Symbols are very, very important. For instance, when in this global satyagraha, 16,000 children die every day. So we would want 1,000 students to come together, and each holds 16 candles, a candle stand with 16 bulbs, or young children, and they could sing and dance, and after 1 hour put out the lights. It is symbolic of 16,000 children dying. Make a video clip, show it on national TV, that 16,000 children die every day. Let's personalize the situation, Suppose that child dying is yours. So then, then make a video clip, show it on TV, and say, so many children die. What can you do? Choose non-violent defense. So we just want to create awareness about this. One last strategy I want to, there are many, but I'll just stop with one more. And that is, Gandhi says, when you do something political, it must touch your personal life. So we would want every person who joins this campaign or is interested in joining, that birthdays are very important. So one birthday, please have a fruit birthday. Don't celebrate with champagne and cake and etc. But just have a fruit birthday. Have a fruit birthday party, and that's your personal protest against war. And one day when we get this, you can always tell your grandchildren or whatever, look, I fasted, or I had a fruit birthday. So the idea is that if you do this, you send us your birthday, and we put it in our newsletter. Somebody in Canada does the same. In fact, a lot of people abroad are doing this. Only in India, somehow we are not able to make headway, as with many other things, since nobody believes in Gandhi. And so, unfortunately, so today I'm very grateful I got this platform to share this with you. And to propagate this, we also have made these, just for awareness, which says, choose non-violent defense. You can buy these on your way out. Only 50 rupees for a car screen. Just to popularize the idea, we also have these T-shirts, which again says, on the back about choosing non-violent defense with Gandhi, and just to popularize the idea. So if you're jogging, please wear this. Only costs 100 rupees. And so just to create the awareness, there are many, many other things. But I think I shall just end with a quote from Gandhi, where he says that it is a sign of spiritual atrophy is like rheumatism, no? But spiritual atrophy means our souls are stuck. We can't feel anymore. We just don't feel about, as he said, about the conscience, that inner conscience is no longer there. Only if you're caught, chalo, the punishment hogi. But that inner punishment is not there. So it's a sign of spiritual atrophy, Gandhi says, to support an unjust structure like war. And he goes on to say, you may not be able to change the structure at once, but you can always choose not to cooperate with it at once. And that is the beauty of non-violent resistance and satyagraha, non-cooperation with injustice. Thank you.